that someone deliberately caused the disaster that took at least 270 lives. We begin our coverage tonight in Lockerbie, Scotland, and Anthony Mason reports.
It was a week ago tonight that Flight 103 fell out of the sky, leaving a 100-mile trail of twisted wreckage and 270 victims. Today, investigators said the evidence was conclusive. It was a bomb.
The explosives residues recovered from the debris have been positively identified and are consistent with the use of a high-performance plastic explosive.
Investigators' first lead came when they found suitcases ripped with metal fragments. Scientific tests then detected traces of detonating explosive in two parts of the framework of the metal luggage hold. Search teams will continue gathering wreckage and debris, but airline engineers can now leave with a sigh of relief. Investigators have completely ruled out structural failure as a cause. In Lockerbie, where many families are still openly mourning their dead and waiting for their relatives to be identified, some today pleaded for restraint.
Let the people grieve, and if you go and try and retaliate against someone, it's just going to happen again.
It will be years before this small village recovers. Entire blocks were destroyed. 11 townspeople are missing, presumed dead. In Lockerbie today, they wondered why anyone would want this to happen to them.
Well, whatever grievance they've got, it's got nothing whatever to do with these people, especially the people in Lockerbie.
With the cause determined, the investigation can now shift. Terrorism experts will take over from airline engineers to ask who planted the bomb and how it was smuggled on board. Anthony Mason, CBS News, Lockerbie, Scotland.
Investigators now believe that the bomb was most likely located in the forward luggage compartment of the Pan Am 747. We have a model here, and as you can see, one of the cargo doors is at the front of the plane. Now, here is what investigators think happened. When the bomb went off, fragments penetrated the plane's skin, the floor, and seats, and hit some of the passengers as well. The shock wave from the bomb was so powerful, it rocked the whole plane and blasted the cockpit off, and indeed a large section of the cockpit came down in one piece some distance away from the rest of the plane's wreckage. One of the first clues that it was a bomb was the shrapnel damage investigators found. It looked a lot like this wreckage of a plane hit by a terrorist bomb in the 1960s. As for the investigation into who might have planted the bomb on Pan Am 103 and why, and what the U.S. response might be, here's Pentagon correspondent David Martin with the latest on that.
We are determined to get to the bottom of this and to find out who did it using all available U.S. resources, including the FBI.
And including a $500,000 reward for information leading to the arrest or conviction of any person who commits a terrorist act against Americans.
I think we've got a very good chance of solving it, maybe 75 or 80%. And the reason I'm confident is that in the past, when we've had major terrorist incidents, if that's what this turns out to be, we've been able to get to the bottom, even though it takes sometimes weeks or months.
But it's one thing to find out who did it, another to bring them to justice.
It is an extremely difficult task to take, and from the evidence which you gain, come up with a definitive conclusion that will stand up in a court of law.
The investigation is covering everyone who came in contact with Pan Am Flight 103, from passengers to crew to baggage handlers, and every piece of evidence which can be recovered from the wreckage.
We're most fortunate in that the plane itself crashed on land, and by and large, apparently the recovery of evidence is more accessible than it certainly would be if it were overseas.
While the FBI is looking for the maker of this bomb, the Federal Aviation Administration will try harder to stop the next bomb before it gets aboard a plane.
We understand the FAA intends to impose some additional countermeasures to further tighten security, which, until we know how this bomb was introduced onto the plane, will focus on passenger processing and cargo and baggage handling.
It's a kind of a race of technology, if you would. The terrorists, on the one hand, becoming more sophisticated with their weapons. We have to get even more sophisticated so we can detect their weapons.
One thing the FAA does not plan to change is its policy of not warning the public of terrorist threats against aircraft.
We get so many of these threats, dozens every week, that it simply would not be, in our view, responsible action on our part to make them all public. It would cause panic.
It is possible this was simply a criminal act, a plot to murder a passenger and collect the insurance, for instance. But the working assumption is that this was a terrorist attack, one of the worst ever against Americans. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.